This is the United Uprising channel. Welcome to today's show. I have to do my best to at least bring attention here on YouTube to a story that isn't really getting national news, and any news that it is getting, because I did see some larger mainstream media affiliates cover it, but of course they're covering it to make excuses for it, and that is in regards to tunnels. You may have heard this story about, well, let's just say what they are. The Synagogue of Satan having a tunnel found underneath one of their supposed, what do you want to call them? Temples? A tunnel. And inside of that tunnel, there was some things like mattresses and all sorts of stuff that made people scratch their heads. And I can't show you the images here, but I can on the website, which I've done already. And other people are sharing updated information on that story over on the website, Uprising Revival. But what I can do is talk. And I'm going to talk to you about it without flashing stuff all over the screen so you have an understanding. They always want you to look at things like that island, where that building is on that island. Now, the colors of that building on the island, that temple on that island, actually point a finger at who's responsible for all of these tunnels that are underground. And you may hear a lot of stories about what's going on in the Middle East and how they're just finding all of these tunnels, right? And they want you to believe that all of these underground tunnels exist because we're supposed to believe that the military and all these people and these militia groups are hiding in tunnels, right? Nobody ever thinks to themselves and says, well, wait a minute, wouldn't they be trapping themselves in these tunnels if people knew that there's military operations going on and they were actually underground? Couldn't somebody just stick a hose in one of these things and flood these people out from one edge to the other? Because they got to come up somewhere, right? They don't want you to realize that the purpose of the tunnels is because of the rituals that are done in these tunnels. They want you to think that the majority of these rituals actually occur in buildings above ground. Buildings that our government points out to us and says, look over there, an island where they're doing all that stuff that you want to figure out who's doing it and find out about it. So look over here. Don't actually look in the teachings of the people who have been thrown out of every single place they've ever been, in the teachings of the people who you're not allowed to question, in the teachings of the people who specifically talk about sacrifice of these young individual human beings. That's for the algorithm, because I can't say the actual word with sacrifice. I can't say the actual word connected to children, so I have to word around it because they're that protected. You see, this specific group of people have been getting thrown out of every single country for a very long time. Very long time. And in fact, they've been thrown out of so many countries, so much so that they ended up residing in what we now live in, which some of us believe is Mystery Babylon. And inside of this country, they're so victimized and so protected that if you even bring attention to their books and what's inside of the books that they read when they go in there on Saturdays, and no, it's not the Old Testament that they're reading for anyone out there that thinks that they go there and they just read the Old Testament. Let's wake up, okay? They talk about the Torah. No, they read inside of these books, they talk about sacrifice, what they're allowed to do with people of a young age. Now, they don't want you to know about this. In fact, so much so that they're currently working on gaslighting all Christians and conservatives into supporting these people. Because these people who pretty much named this piece of this area in 1949, this specific area, which is hijacked, which is completely filled with the wrong people, they've decided to lure Christians. They knew that they could get away with this stuff and, in fact, lure and deceive Christians into being okay with the things they're doing because Christians think in their eye they're the apple of God's eye and they could do no wrong. So, as the stories come out about this underground thing, I'm going to read you some important stuff, okay? So bear with me and stay with me as I read some of the stuff that's out there in the mainstream media, as well as how all of this stuff is actually biblical. And people don't realize that because when they think of the Bible, they usually just go, I don't really understand that much, or they want to hear stuff about love, and they want to hear the Psalms and things like that. But I'll read that to you in a second. Okay, so this is the mainstream media reporting on these tunnels that were found, and not realizing that all of these buildings have tunnels or some underground rooms in them. And no, it's not for them to store window cleaner and extra rolls of toilet paper. They have these underground tunnels and temples and rooms with altars in them because this all goes back to the Old Testament and Baal worship. They're protected under a new alias, a new name. But the Bible tells us there'll be those who claim that they are and aren't, are of the synagogue of Satan. And that's exactly who we're living among now. The same people who claim that they were victims during a certain war, the same people who claim that they're such victims that you shouldn't be able to question what's in their books. And if you actually question this story about tunnels, Well, you're just being an anti-you-know-what, horrible person. So the USA Today, keep this in mind, amid what they're trying to do with the conflict in the Middle East, which is pin two sides against each other. They're making that a Democrat and Republican thing, right? All we hear about is free Palestine from the libs, and all we hear from the conservatives is God's chosen people are under attack, thinking that this is biblical. This portion of it is biblical because they don't understand who Israel really is, right? So they're using it to that effect. But when it comes to this story, you would think that maybe they would say, hey, wait a minute. These people, we're trying to free Palestine. We're saying that these people are bad in the news. So let's talk about what's in their books and what's actually going on in the underground tunnels over there. Oh, wait, we can't do that because that'll blow this whole operation up. Everyone will realize who controls the media, who controls all these things, why they control it, and how they're hurting everyone. So this is from the USA Today. They say the New York Department of Buildings issued an emergency work order to stabilize buildings near the headquarters of this building specifically in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, after the shocking discovery of a tunnel running under the historic building that led to a clash with police and multiple arrests earlier this week. The department's investigation, which began Tuesday morning, uncovered a 5-foot-high, 8-foot-wide tunnel spanning 60 feet and connecting four neighboring buildings on the ground level, according to a statement emailed to USA Today. It goes on to say, the owners of the two single-story buildings were hit with 2 violations for work without a permit for constructing the tunnel without the department's approval. So these are the stories that are coming out, right? Oh, well, they're digging tunnels without approval. Don't mind the altars or the mattresses or other disturbing things that were found in there. We're just going to change the topic to the reason that the arrests are being made, of course, is because, they're violating permit codes and things like that, right? Because that's how this whole thing works. You see, they continue to point while this story's going on over to that island because they want you to point at the island because it's just a make-believe rabbit hole. Are the people who are on those lists involved? Well, of course they are. Is anything going to be done to any of them? Of course not. Of course not. That's the point. That's the point. You get it? Because the specific people here are the ones responsible. And you'll find a lot of their names on the list, but see, they don't care. As long as this quote-unquote religion, which is really Babylonian, I don't want to say the words that trigger the algorithm. Let's just say Babylonian teachings, mystery school, mystery religion teachings, which all just goes back to Luciferian teachings, okay? That goes back to the Bible when people were led a certain land and then they started practicing these things out in the open. And of course, they, broke away from God, right? And I'll get into that in a second. So what's important to note is when you think about these things in the tunnels, you think about things like McMartin. If you're not familiar with McMartin, that's how I woke up to everything. For anyone out there that's new and wonders, how did this guy wake up? What happened? Well, the McMartin preschool is how I woke up. Now, that video is available on the website. And that's, every time I've uploaded here, it's been banned. There's no way it's going up now on here because it'll just get taken down in 3 seconds. Okay? Same type of story. Underground tunnels that were leading to airports, that were flying people in and out, celebrities specifically, children of celebrities and politicians' homes, even houses in the hills that end up getting burnt to the ground conveniently because they didn't want you to see any of the evidence there, because that's how they destroy evidence, by burning it. They filled in the tunnels at McMartin. Long story short, they wouldn't go and investigate the tunnels. They filled in the tunnels. And then Ted Gunderson went and he excavated the tunnels. He had 2 weeks to do it before they built over because they immediately had to build something over it, a structure over it, because they didn't want anyone to find any evidence, right? So he went in there, and of course, what they find, all sorts of satanic crap underground, tunnels that led to airports, etc. And it gets dismissed because you're not allowed to address it. You got to look where they want you to look. You can't look where, if things like this in New York pop up and stories like this pop up, well, that's a problem to them. So they'll make sure that they give you your little tea leaf. So while people hear of that story, especially conservatives, they're not going to go and investigate that story. Why aren't they going to investigate the story? Because, well, that's God's chosen people. They could never be doing anything like that. In fact, they've been victims their whole lives. So we're not going to look there, but we'll look over at that island because Jimmy Kimmel or all these people's names were on a list, and we hate them anyway because they're pushing the Communist Manifesto right down our throats. Well, that's understandable that makes you mad, but it's all right in front of your face. This is right in front of your face. This story is right in front of your face. This should wake you up. This is stuff I've covered. This is stuff that's forbidden and banned on this platform. This is what the alt-right media won't talk about. So for those of you who are biblical, because I'm assuming the majority of people who found my channel in some way, shape, or form are Christian. If you're not, well, then hear me out. Hear me out. Because you've probably gone to church. You probably lost attention in the church while you're sitting there, maybe daydreamed, didn't feel like you were connected. Let me just read this to you, and you tell me if this sounds at all anything like this story about the tunnels, which you should know about, and now you do at least know about from me bringing attention to it. You could go research it yourself in more detail. Okay, let me read from you the abominations in the temple, which have tunnels and mystery holes in the wall that go back to Ezekiel chapter 8. And it came to pass in the 6th year, in the 6th month of the 5th day of the month, as I sat in my house with the elders of Judah sitting before me, that the hand of the Lord God fell upon me there. Then I looked, and there was a likeness, like the appearance of fire, from the appearance of his waist and downward fire, and from his waist and upward, like the appearance of brightness, like the color of amber. He stretched out the form of a hand and took me by a lock of my hair, and the Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven, and brought me in visions of God to Jerusalem, to the door of the north gate of the inner court, where the seat of the image of jealousy was, which provokes to jealousy. And behold, the glory of God of Israel was there, like the vision that I saw in the plain. Then he said to me, Son of man, lift your eyes now toward the north. So I lifted my eyes toward the north, and there north of the altar gate was the image of jealousy in the entrance. Furthermore, he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The great abominations that the house of Israel commits here, to make me go far away from my sanctuary. Now turn again, you will see greater abominations. So he brought me to the door of the court, and when I looked, where there was a hole in the wall. Then he said to me, Son of man, dig into the wall. And when I dug into the wall, there was a door. And he said to me, Go in and see the wicked abominations which they are doing there. So I went in and saw, and there every sort of creeping thing, abominable beasts, and all the idols of the house of Israel portrayed all around on the walls. And there stood before them 70 men of the elders of the house of Israel. And in their midst stood Jazaniah, the son of Shaphan. Each man had a censer in his hand, and a thick cloud of incense went up. Then he said to me, Son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel do in the dark? Every man in the room of his idols, for they say the Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. And he said to me, Turn again, and you will see greater abominations that they are doing. So he brought me to the door of the north gate of the Lord's house. And to my dismay, women were sitting there weeping for Tammuz. Then he said to me, Have you seen this, O son of man? Turn again. You will see greater abominations than these. So he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house. And there at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east. And they were worshiping the sun toward the east. And he said to me, Have you seen this, O son of man? Is it a trivial thing to the house of Judah to commit the abominations which they commit here? For they have filled the land with violence. Then they have returned to provoke me to anger. Indeed, they put the branch to their nose. Therefore, I also will act in fury. My eye will not spare, nor will I have pity. And though they cry in my ears with a loud voice, I will not hear them. So when you hear that story about what God was showing, okay, what was God showing there? Showing these things that were going on, right? The abominations that were going on. Abominations and great abominations. Great abominations inside of walls. So if man, dig into the wall, he said, right? Go in, see the wicked abominations that they're doing in there. They're still doing it in there. Is anyone connecting the dots? They're still doing these wicked abominations in there. Even then, they were hiding in the walls and hiding underground, their protected places. These places, temples. So while we can look and see a temple sitting on an island out in plain sight, all one has to do if they really want to solve any of this stuff is start looking, not at the temple on the island, maybe the temples in their town, including those Masonic temples as well. I wanted to do a quick video on this. If I go into any more detail, I'll obviously get a strike. There's always a good chance I get a strike even just for this, right? That's why the images on the screen are very simple. So the algorithm is kind of confused, what it's trying to figure out, right? Let it be confused. I might even put my logo up only on the screen. But I wanted to do a video because I know it's on a lot of people's minds, and I know a lot of people don't want to join the website to hear me talk about it. But if you do want to see videos, they're actually breaking down these teachings, showing you what these people actually do and why you're not allowed to ask questions about these specific people, why you're not allowed to bring attention to these specific people and their teachings, and why these specific people have been run out everywhere they've ever been in human history. It's not because what their sideburns look like. It's because of what they were practicing in their books. And this all goes back to Babylon. I thank everybody for being here. Make sure you're subbed to my backup channel now. It's linked below, A Call for Vengeance. Okay, if I get a strike here, I can't upload for quite some time. So take the time now, subscribe to that channel. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you. God bless all of you always and your families.